It was the autumn of 1869. The wind, which had not stopped for 3 months, finally seemed to pause and draw a breath. It carried the smell of dust and dry grass. But under that, it carried the sharp, clean scent of sage. The sky over the Texas and New Mexico borderlands was high and pale, a clean piece of slate waiting for a message. Down by the Llano River, in a sheltered fold of the land, steam rose from a hot spring. The water bubbled from the earth, a place of healing. Not far from the spring, a large herd of horses grazed, their coats thick against the coming cold. They were the wealth of Tahan's people, their freedom, their dignity. From the ridge, Tahan watched them. He was a young man, perhaps 21 or 22 winters, but his eyes held the quiet of someone much older. The weight on him was new, and it was heavy. It had been 6 moons since the militia had swept through, looking for rustlers they claimed were Comanche. They had found his older brother, Catano, who had been hunting alone. They had left him where he fell. The loss was a cold stone in Tahan's chest. He heard the words of the elder, the old man who had seen 80 winters. The words had been spoken at the fire after the morning. The world changes. Tahan, the old man had said, his voice like dry leaves. The iron snake comes from the east. He had pointed not with his finger, but with his chin, toward the horizon. They will not stop. They want the land. They want the water. Your brother is gone. You are the watcher now. Protect the water. Protect the herd. Protect the weak. Tahan had nodded. It was a promise. But as he sat there, listening to the horses rip grass and the buzz of late-season insects, he heard another sound. It was faint, carried on that high, thin wind. A rhythmic clink, clink, clink. It was the sound of iron on iron, the sound of men driving spikes into wooden ties. Miles away, the sound of the railroad. It was the sound of the world changing too fast. Miles to the east, in the raw, new town of San Miguel Crossing, Eliza Beaumont felt a different kind of pressure. She stood behind the counter of Beaumont Mercantile, a business that no longer felt like it belonged to her family. The store smelled of coffee beans, cured leather, and the sour tang of her stepfather's anxiety. Eliza was 19. She had her mother's dark hair, but her father's steady, observing eyes. Her mother had been dead for 2 years, taken by a fever that the town doctor could not name. Her stepfather, Mr. Whitlock, had taken over the store and, in his grief and incompetence, had run it straight into debt. He was in the small office at the back of the store now, his voice a low, pleading rumble. The other voice was not low. It was confident, oily, and belonged to Silas Grigg. The debt stands at $300. Whitlock, Silas Grigg said. The words came clearly through the thin wooden door. That is what the paper says. And the interest, well, the interest is 20%, compounded. You are a drowning man.
Silas, please, Whitlock wheezed. Just another month. The Army payroll will come through.
The Army payroll is not coming to you, Silas replied, and Eliza could picture him leaning back in the chair, hands behind his head. It is coming to me. I own the note on this store. I own the note on your house. I own you. There was a silence. Then Silas Grigg's voice changed, became almost friendly. But I am a reasonable man. I am a man who believes in community. I have need of a wife, a respectable wife, someone to manage my new house, the one I am building by the river. Eliza closed her eyes. Her stomach turned to ice. What are you saying? Whitlock stammered. I am saying, Silas said, his voice smooth, that I find your stepdaughter, Miss Eliza, to be a woman of quality. A marriage settles all accounts. The debt is gone. The store is yours again. Everyone is happy. Eliza Whitlock's voice was faint. Think on it, Silas Grigg said. The chair scraped. The office door opened, and he emerged. He was a broad man, dressed in a suit that was too expensive for this town. He saw Eliza by the counter and smiled, a smile that did not touch his eyes. He tipped his hat to her and walked out, the jingle of his spurs loud on the wooden floor. Eliza looked at her hands. They were trembling. She had learned to read from her mother's books. She knew there was a world beyond this dusty street, a world where people were not bought and sold. She had often thought that freedom was like breathing. You did not notice it until someone's hand was at your throat. Now, she felt the hand closing. San Miguel Crossing was a town balanced on a knife edge. It was a place of hopeful new beginnings and desperate last chances. Reverend Hale preached every Sunday about salvation, but the saloon stayed open 6 nights a week. Isaiah, the town blacksmith, worked his forge from dawn until dusk. He was a free man, a former slave, and his skill with iron was the only thing that kept the meaner elements of the town from bothering him. He worked, he kept his head down, and he watched. Cowboys, flush with pay from a cattle drive, would ride in and own the town for a night, their gunshots echoing long after the sun went down. There were whispers of gold in the hills, rumors that brought in new prospectors every week, men with haunted eyes and empty pockets. The town notice board outside the sheriff's office was a testament to the times. One poster, printed in bold black letters, called for 100 men, strongbacks for the railroad. Good pay. Inquire with Silas Grigg. Beside it, another poster, older and stained with tobacco juice, offered $5 reward for the return of any stray or the scalp of any hostile found on deeded land. The conflict was not just a poster, it was real, a sickness in the air. New survey stakes, bright yellow and smelling of pine, had appeared on the plains. They marked lines that the Comanche did not recognize, lines that cut across their hunting grounds, lines that came closer and closer to the sacred hot spring. A new group, calling themselves the Volunteer Militia, had formed. They were mostly men who worked for Grigg or the railroad. Last week, they had ridden out to a small camp of Lipan Apache and dismantled their lodges, claiming the land was for a new railroad spur. They had burned the grass, the black smoke visible for 50 miles. The county sheriff had watched it happen and done nothing. The government, it seemed, was a partner in the theft. That evening, Tahan returned to his camp. The smoke from the cooking fires was a welcome smell. He brought a small rabbit for his sister and her children. He sat with the elder, sharing tobacco in silence. The faint clink, clink, clink from the east had finally stopped as the sun went down. But in its place, Tahan felt the pressure of the train smoke, a smudge on the clean horizon. It was the weight of a coming world, a world that wanted to crush the horses, to fence the springs, to own the land. In her small room above the store, Eliza packed a canvas bag. She packed a loaf of bread, a block of cheese, a tin of matches, and her mother's small book of poetry. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could not stay. She believed in small things. A kind word, a shared piece of bread, the way her mother used to tend to a sick plant. Love, her mother had told her, was not a grand gesture. It was born from 1,000 small, decent things. She looked at the man who wanted to buy her, Silas Grigg, and she saw a man who believed in nothing small, only in the grand, brutal gestures of power. She would not be one of them. She would find her own breath, or she would die trying. The hot spring steamed in the twilight, a promise of healing. The horses stamped and blew in the darkness, a promise of freedom. And the smoke from the distant unseen trains settled into the valleys, a promise of industry and a threat of chains. The lines were being drawn. The town fair was a frantic, false light in the middle of the dark prairie. Fiddle music sawed through the air, barely covering the sound of loud, drunken laughter from the saloon. San Miguel Crossing was celebrating the harvest, though the only thing the town seemed to harvest was dust and debt. Torches stuck in barrels cast wild, dancing shadows. Eliza Beaumont moved through the shadows, not the light. She had told her stepfather she was going to the church social, but she had slipped away. She was drawn to the back alley behind the mercantile, where a lantern burned in the small office. She knew who was in there. She had seen Silas Grigg go in, followed by her stepfather, Mr. Whitlock, who had the look of a man walking to the gallows. She pressed her ear to the rough wooden planks of the back wall. "It is a simple contract. Whitlock," Silas Grigg's voice was patient, like a man explaining a sum to a child, "a betrothal agreement. It states that in consideration of all outstanding debts being forgiven, your stepdaughter, Miss Eliza Beaumont, agrees to become my wife upon her 20th birthday, or sooner if mutually agreed upon." "Silas, she will not. She is a strong-willed girl," Whitlock whispered. His voice was thick with sweat. "She is a 19-year-old girl who lives under your roof," Grigg countered, his voice hardening. "You are her guardian. You will sign, or by sunrise, the sheriff will padlock this store, and you will be in the street. I will have the debt one way or another. Whitlock, this way is clean. It makes you solvent. It makes me content." There was a sound of paper rustling, a long, terrible silence. Then the scratch of a pen nib, a signature given under duress. There, that was not so hard. Was it? Grigg's voice was light again. "We will announce it at the end of the night. A celebration." Eliza's blood ran cold. She backed away from the wall, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She did not run. She did not cry. She walked. She walked with a sudden, terrible purpose, back through the shadows, away from the mercantile, toward the livery stable at the edge of town. She did not steal a horse. She took the mare, Bess, a gentle sorrel that her true father had bought her before he died. Whitlock had sold the horse to the livery to pay a feed bill, but the horse still knew Eliza's scent. She slipped a bridle on the animal, her hands shaking so hard it took her 3 tries. She did not bother with a saddle. She led the mare out the back, quiet as a ghost, and mounted from a rain barrel. She kept to the dark spaces, moving behind the saloon, past the land office. As she neared the blacksmith's forge, which was dark, she heard a scuffle in the alley beside it. "I told you, I will not do it," a deep voice rumbled. It was Isaiah, the blacksmith. "Mr. Grigg wants that brand made by morning." Another voice, a slurring, mean voice, replied, "He is marking the new boundaries." "It is a cattle brand," Isaiah said, his voice calm. "I know what it is for. It is for marking trees on land that does not belong to him. It is a liar's brand. I will not make it." "You will," a third voice said. Eliza pulled Bess into the deep shadow of the forge. She saw 3 men. 2 were railroad workers she recognized, men who always walked with a swagger, men who worked for Grigg. They were surrounding Isaiah, who stood with his arms crossed. He was a mountain of a man, his muscles visible even in the dark. "I will not," Isaiah said again. The first man swung. It was not a fist, but a length of chain. It caught Isaiah on the shoulder. The sound a dull, heavy thwack. The blacksmith grunted, stumbling back, but he did not raise his hands to fight. "You think you are a man," the second one taunted, and he kicked Isaiah in the stomach. Isaiah bent over, gasping. "I am a man," he breathed. "That is why I will not." They hit him again, the chain and then a boot. They were laughing. They beat him until he fell to his knees, and then to his side, where he lay still, just breathing. "He will make it in the morning," the first man said, spitting on the ground. "He just needs persuasion." They walked away, laughing, heading back toward the music of the fair. Eliza sat on the mare, frozen. That was Silas Grigg's world. That was the man she was betrothed to. A world built on lies, on paper, and on chain. She nudged the mare with her heels, not toward the road north, but west, toward the open prairie, toward the river. She rode away from the sound of the fiddle, and under it, the faint, pained groans of a good man lying in the dirt. She rode fast, her hands tangled in the mare's mane, the wind pulling at her hair. She did not know where she was going. She just knew she had to cross the water. The moon was a sliver, giving just enough light to show the ground, but not enough to show the way. She pushed the mare hard, scrambling down a dry arroyo, crossing the shallow part of the llano, and climbing the far bank. She was in open country now. The air smelled of sage and cool stone. She was running, but she did not know she was running straight into the lines that had been drawn long before Silas Grigg's survey stakes. She was in a small, rocky canyon when the horse shied, rearing in sudden panic. Before Eliza could control her, 2 riders emerged from the rocks. They were on small, fast ponies, and they were not from her world. They were Comanche. They were young, their faces intent, and they carried lances. They shouted at her. The words were sharp, guttural. She pulled Bess to a halt, her own voice trapped in her throat. The mare danced, terrified. One of the sentries reached for her bridle. Eliza, in her panic, kicked the horse to move, but there was nowhere to go. She slipped from the horse's bare back, landing hard on the rocky ground. A sharp pain shot up her arm as she hit, the rock scraping her skin raw. She cried out, a small sound of pain and fear. The 2 sentries dismounted. They were speaking to each other, looking at her, then at the mare. Then a 3rd rider appeared. He did not ride in fast. He simply emerged from the shadows, as if the rock itself had produced him. He was older than the other 2. He was Tahan. He looked at the scene, the panting, lathered mare, the 2 tense sentries, and the girl on the ground. Clutching her arm, he saw her face, white in the moonlight, streaked with dirt. He saw the terror in her eyes. He spoke to his men. His voice was low and calm, and the 2 young sentries immediately stepped back, their lances still ready, but no longer threatening. Tahan dismounted. He walked toward Eliza. She scrambled backward, pushing herself against a boulder. He stopped 10 feet away. He held up one hand, palm out. He looked at her, then at her arm, which was bleeding. He saw she was not a threat. She was a child, and she was hurt. "Your weapon," he said. The English was slow, careful. I have nothing," she stammered. "Please, I was just running." Tahan's gaze was steady. He did not believe she was a threat, but he knew what she was. She was a white woman, alone, on their land, in the middle of the night. She was trouble. She was the kind of trouble that brought militia. He heard it then, faintly, the jingle of harness, horses shod with iron, moving down by the river. A patrol. He looked at the girl. He looked at his 2 men. He was the watcher. Protect the weak. Was she weak, or was she the bait in a trap? He made his choice. He spoke to his men in their own tongue. One of them took the bridle of Eliza's mare. Tahan turned back to her. "You will be silent," he said, the words quiet but absolute. "You will come." He offered a hand to help her up. She flinched but took it. He pulled her to her feet. He led her, not toward their camp, but away from the patrol, up a steep, narrow game trail, into the rocks, into the darkness. He felt the heavy weight of his decision. He was hiding an outsider. If the patrol found her, there would be questions. If his own people found her, there would be different questions. Kindness, he was learning, was a heavy stone to carry. Back in San Miguel Crossing, the celebration had turned sour. Whitlock, drunk and terrified, had finally admitted Eliza was gone. The mare was gone. Silas Grigg was not a man who liked his property to walk away. His fury was cold and precise. He did not shout. He acted. He went to the sheriff's office, dragging Whitlock with him. "She is gone," Grigg announced to the sleepy deputy. "My fiancée, Eliza Beaumont. She went for a ride and did not return. The tracks head west, toward the river." "Mr. Grigg, she probably just got turned around," the deputy said, rubbing his eyes. "She was taken," Grigg said, his voice hard as iron. "The Comanche, they raided the Miller farm 2 months ago. They have her." The deputy was awake now.
Are you certain?
I am certain. I want a posse. I want every man from the railroad camp. And I am posting a reward. By the time the sun began to pale in the east, a new poster was being nailed to the notice board. It was written by hand, in Silas Grigg's bold, dark script. $100, gold, for the safe return of Miss Eliza Beaumont, abducted by a Comanche war party. Justice will be done. Inquire with Silas Grigg. The story was set. The lie was printed. The men, smelling blood and money, gathered their rifles. The truth, already bleeding in an alley and lost in the rocks of a canyon, did not stand a chance. From the east, faint and clear in the morning air, came the distant, lonely wail of the train. The game trail was not a path for people, but for goats and shadows. Tahan moved up it with a silent, fluid grace, his feet finding holds that Eliza Beaumont could not even see. For her, it was a torment. Her arm throbbed from the scrape, her lungs burned, and every step on the loose rock sent a new jolt of pain through her body. She was caked in dust and sweat, and the fear she had felt in the alley had now settled into a cold, hard knot in her stomach. Tahan did not look back. He just moved, a dark shape against the pre-dawn gray, pulling her deeper into the land she did not know. He was her captor, yet he had saved her from the patrol. He was a savage, yet he had not harmed her. The contradiction was as sharp as the stones under her feet. After what felt like hours, the air changed. The dry, dusty scent of the plains was replaced by something else, the smell of sulfur and damp earth, a thick, mineral tang. The path widened, and suddenly they were standing on a ledge overlooking a shallow basin. Steam rose from the ground in thick, white plumes, obscuring the landscape like a fog. The hot spring. Tahan stopped. He listened, his head tilted, not to her, but to the world around them. He heard the bubble of the water, the first call of a morning bird. He was satisfied. They were alone. He turned to her. In the growing light, he could finally see her clearly. She was a mess. Her dark hair was tangled with bits of leaf and burr. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. The blood on her arm had mixed with dirt, drying into a black crust. Her face was streaked with grime, and she was shivering, though the air near the steam was warm. He looked at her, and his decision was not one of kindness, but of practicality. She was filthy. She smelled of panic in the town. She could not be brought near his people like this. He pointed to a section of the spring, a pool sheltered by a tall curtain of black rock. "There," he said. His voice was low, impersonal. "The water is hot. It will clean." Eliza stared at him, uncomprehending. "What?" "Wash," he said. The single word was an order. He gestured again, more firmly. "There, behind the rock. It is hidden." She hesitated, looking from him to the pool. It was a choice between her fear and her misery. The misery won. She was so cold, so sore. The hot water looked like a blessing. She nodded, clutching the torn fabric of her dress. Tahan watched her take 2 steps toward the pool. Then he turned away, walking downstream to a different part of the spring, a shallower pool screened by a thicket of willow. It was the place the men used before sunrise. He needed to wash the tension of the patrol from his own skin. He needed to think. Eliza reached the rock. She moved behind it, finding a small, secluded pool fed by a cascade of steaming water. She was truly hidden. She looked around. He was gone, with trembling fingers. She unbuttoned her dress, letting the ruined garment fall to the ground. She unlaced her boots, her movements clumsy. She stood for a moment, a pale, thin figure in the steam, and then eased herself into the water. It was too hot at first, a shock that made her gasp. But then the heat seeped into her bones, into her bruised muscles, and it was the most profound relief she had ever known. She leaned her head back against the rock, letting the water cover her, and she almost wept. She scrubbed at her face, her arms, the mud caking her legs. The water washed away the dirt, but it could not wash away the last 2 days. Tahan finished his own wash quickly. The water felt good, but it did not calm the disquiet in his mind. He had broken a rule. He had brought an outsider to a sacred place, a place of peace, and he had done it in the dark. He heard the elder's voice in his head, "Protect the water." He was protecting it, but he had also defiled it with this intrusion. He stood to leave, pulling on his breeches. He was reaching for his shirt when he heard the sound. It was not a loud sound. It was a sharp cry, a splash, and the clatter of a dislodged stone. Eliza, feeling more human, had tried to stand. She had put her hand on a rock to steady herself, but the rock was slick with green, wet moss. Her foot slipped. Her balance was gone. She fell backward, out of her secluded pool, tumbling down a short, wet slide of rock and landing with a heavy splash in the pool below. The pool where Tahan had just been. She landed in waist-deep water, stunned and sputtering. The steam was thick, and for a second, she was disoriented. Then it parted, like a curtain being drawn. He was standing on the bank, not 10 feet away. He had stopped, frozen, in the act of pulling his shirt on. He was bare-chested, the muscles of his back and shoulders defined and solid. He was not the boy she had thought. He was a man. They stared at each other for a single, silent, impossible second. Her, pale and vulnerable in the water. Him, dark and powerful on the land. In that second, he saw all of her. Not as a prize, not as a woman, but as a fact, a white, naked, and terrified fact that had just fallen into the heart of his world. Eliza's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She was too terrified to even scream. She just watched him, her eyes wide, waiting for the blow to fall. Tahan's reaction was not what she expected. It was faster than thought. He did not stare. He did not smile. He did not move toward her. He turned his back. It was an absolute, immediate rejection. He presented her with a solid wall of bronze skin, turning so completely that he could not see even a glimpse of her. He stood there, rigid, a guardian statue. "Stay," he commanded, his voice tight. He moved, walking away from her to where his belongings were. He picked up his heavy buckskin coat. He walked back to the edge of the pool, his back still facing her, and he held the coat out behind him. The gesture was awkward, impersonal. "Take it," he said. Eliza, trembling so hard her teeth chattered, waded forward. She was mortified, her skin burning with an embarrassment so total it erased her fear. She grabbed the coat. It was heavy, worn, and warm from his body. She pulled it from his hand and wrapped it around herself. It was huge. It enveloped her, the leather sleeves hanging far past her hands, the hem brushing her knees, and the smell. It was the smell of the prairie, of sage, of wood smoke, and of the man himself. It was not a bad smell. It was a clean smell, an earthy smell, and in her terror, it was the first thing that had felt like protection in 2 days. It was the sweetest scent she had ever known, a memory fixing itself in her mind. "Come," he said. He did not turn. He began walking, forcing her to follow. He led her away from the water, up a small path, his bare back still a rigid shield. He retrieved his shirt and pulled it on. Still without looking at her, he led her to a place in the rocks, a narrow cleft, almost a cave, hidden by a tangle of wild currant bushes. The air inside was dry and surprisingly warm, heated by a steam vent from the spring below. "You will stay here," he said. He finally looked at her, but his gaze was on her face, her eyes. He refused to look any lower. "Do not move. Do not make a sound." He left her there, huddled in his coat, and disappeared. He found his 2 sentries by the horse herd, their faces grim. "We found the tracks," one said, his voice urgent. "A shod horse, down by the river. The militia patrol missed them, but we found them. Tahan's mind worked quickly. Her horse. If they found it, they would know she was here. Find the horse, he said. Bring it here, quietly. Do not let anyone see you. The sentries nodded and slipped away. Tahan turned and walked toward the center of the camp, toward the lodge of the elder. This was the part he dreaded. The old man was awake, smoking his morning pipe by the fire. He looked up as Tahan approached, his eyes clouded with age, seeing everything. You were out late, watcher, the old man said. Tahan sat. He did not waste words. I found a woman, a white woman, by the river. The elder's hand paused, the pipe halfway to his mouth. He just listened. She was running. She was hurt. She was alone. The militia was on the patrol. I hid her. You hid her, the elder repeated. It was not a question. Yes, Tahan looked at the fire. She is at the spring. I brought her to the warm cave. The old man was silent for a long time. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. You followed the word, he said at last, his voice raspy. You protected the weak, but this weakness is different. This weakness brings rifles. It brings fire. She is just a girl, Tahan said. A girl who fell into the men's bathing pool, the elder asked. Tahan's head snapped up. How did you? The steam carries whispers. Tahan, the sentries talk. You have brought a white woman, naked, into our sacred water. This is not a small thing. This is a story that men like Silas Grigg can use against us. This is the excuse they have been waiting for. Tahan felt a cold dread. What do I do? She cannot stay, the elder said, but she cannot be seen leaving. You have brought a shadow into our camp. You must find a way to make it leave without it touching us. As the elder spoke those words, the sun was rising over San Miguel Crossing. Silas Grigg stood on the wooden porch of the saloon, a tin cup of coffee in his hand. He was addressing a crowd of nearly 30 men. They were a rough mix, some of his toughest railroad crew, a few nervous townsfolk who believed his story, and a half-dozen hard-faced men from the old militia, men who lived for the promise of violence. Gentlemen, Grigg's voice was loud and full of false righteousness. This is not just an abduction. I have it on good authority. My bride-to-be, Miss Eliza, was seen speaking to that Comanche renegade, Tahan. She was lured away, deceived by his heathen promises. A murmur went through the crowd. This was a new, juicier story. He is a killer. Like his brother before him, Grigg smashed his cup on the porch, a dramatic spray of brown liquid. They have taken her for their own foul purposes. They dishonor her. And in doing so, they dishonor this town. They dishonor our women. He pointed west. We ride for honor. We ride for justice. We ride to bring back what is ours, and we ride for that $100 reward. A ragged cheer went up. The men, drunk on the performance and the promise of gold, ran for their horses. They were not a posse. They were a lynch mob, and they were riding straight for the spring. In the cave, Eliza shivered, though she was not cold. The steam seeped in, warming the small space. She pulled the heavy coat tighter. The smell of sage was strong, a strange comfort in a world gone mad. She was hidden, she was protected, but the steam that warmed her, she knew, was also the steam that had revealed her. The transformation had begun, and it was a terrifying one. Tahan returned as the sun climbed high enough to burn the mist off the ground. He carried a small bundle. He did not enter the cave, but stood at its mouth, a dark silhouette against the bright, tangled currant bushes. They are gone, he said. His voice was flat. Eliza Beaumont, who had been sitting with her knees drawn to her chest, startled. She was still wrapped in his heavy coat. He pushed the bundle toward her. Your clothes. They are dry now. Put them on. You cannot wear this. He meant the coat. It was not a gesture of modesty. It was a retrieval of his property. She took the bundle, her hands brushing his. His skin was warm. She fumbled with the clothes, turning her back to him in the small, enclosed space. Her own dress, torn and washed. Felt strange, a thin and useless garment. His coat had been a fortress. When she was dressed, she handed the coat back to him. He took it, his eyes scanning the ridgeline above the spring, never settling on her. "The men from the town, the posse, they are looking for you," he said. "They are looking for Silas Grigg's property," Eliza said, the words bitter. "He thinks he owns me. He lied. He told them that you took me." Tahan's face did not change. "And did I not? I was running. She said, you hid me." "I hid a stray calf that wanders into a wolf den," he said, slinging the coat over his shoulder. "Now the wolves are sniffing at my own lodge. You must go." Go where her voice was thin with a new panic. "They will find me. He will find me." Tahan looked at her, a long, assessing look. He saw her scraped arm, the terror that was still in her eyes, but beneath it, the flicker of defiance he had seen when she spoke of Grigg. He had a problem. He could not keep her. He could not turn her loose. If the posse found her, they would see it as proof. If his own people found her, they would see it as a betrayal. "You walk like a shod horse," he said. "You make too much sound. You will be found, not by them, but by me. Come." He turned and walked, not toward the camp, but up the rocky slope. For the next 2 hours, he was not her savior or her captor. He was a teacher. He was a hard teacher. He stopped, pointing to the ground. "What do you see?" Eliza stared. Dirt rocks. He crouched, touching a single, bent blade of grass. "The wind comes from the west. This grass is bent east, but this one is bent south. Something passed here, not wind." He moved on. He showed her a pebble, its damp underside exposed to the sun, a sign it had been turned over in the last hour. He showed her the difference between the track of a deer and the track of a pony, the way the pony's hoof left a deeper mark on the downhill side. "These are the roads," he said, sweeping his hand toward the seemingly empty plain. "The ones you cannot see, the water roads. They are the safe paths, the ones that lead to life, the iron road, the one your people are building. It cuts across all of them. It does not care for the land. It only cares for the line. That is why it is stupid, and why it is so dangerous." Eliza watched, and she listened. Her mother had taught her to read books. This man was teaching her to read the earth. She found she was a quick study. She pointed to a faint scrape on a rock. "That is from iron a shod horse." Tahan stopped. He looked at the mark. He nodded, a single, sharp dip of his chin. "You are not as stupid as you look." He turned, and as he did, he winced. A small, tight motion. He flexed his right hand, which he had kept partially closed all morning. "You are hurt," she said. "It is nothing." He kept walking. "You are favoring it," she insisted, moving to walk beside him. "Let me see." He stopped, annoyed. "It is a scratch from the rocks. When I caught the mare—" "A scratch can turn to poison," she said, her voice firm, echoing words her mother had used. "Please." Reluctantly, as if annoyed at the delay, he held out his hand. The palm was scraped raw, just as her arm had been, but his was deeper, the cut full of black grime. Eliza looked at it, then looked around her. She walked to a patch of flat-leaved plants growing close to the ground. She knew this one. Plantain. Her mother had called it the road weed and said it was a gift. She plucked several leaves, put them in her mouth, and began to chew them into a green, wet pulp. Tahan watched her, his expression a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. She came back to him and, before he could pull away, she spat the poultice directly into his open palm. He flinched, staring at the green mess. "It will draw the poison," she said, her voice clinical, "and it will stop the bleeding." She tore a strip of cloth from her already ruined petticoat. "Now hold still." He did not move. He let her clean the wound with the last of the water from her canteen. He let her apply the poultice, ached a second time. He let her wrap the cloth strip firmly around his hand, her fingers surprisingly gentle and sure. When she was done, she tied it off. They stood there for a moment. He looked at the bandage. She looked at his face. The trust, which had been a thin, brittle thread, now had a small, strong knot in it. He said nothing. He just grunted and turned, and they continued their lesson. Far below them, Tahan's sentries watched the plain, and in San Miguel Crossing, Silas Grigg was also watching. He stood on the steps of the land office, his voice carrying over the heads of a new, larger crowd. He had legitimized his hunt. "I know some of you are saying this is a personal matter," he shouted, his voice ringing with false passion, "that it is between me and my intended. But it is not. This is about the soul of this land." He pointed to a woman in the crowd, a Mrs. Miller, whose farm had been raided. Ask her about the safety of her children. This savage, Tahan, is the brother of a known killer. The apple does not fall far from the tree. He has stolen a white woman, a Christian woman. He has taken her into his heathen camp to do God knows what. A murmur of outrage rippled through the crowd. "The law is slow," Grigg roared, "but our justice is swift. I have the backing of the railroad and the authority of the county. To declare this land safe, I am posting a new bounty, $10 in gold. For the capture of the renegade Tahan, 100 for the safe return of Miss Beaumont. Go cleanse the land. Protect your homes." This was what the men wanted to hear. It was not a request. It was a license. From a high ridge, Tahan and Eliza watched the dust. A large party, maybe 30 riders, fanning out from the town, heading west. "They are coming," Eliza whispered, her voice sick. "They are looking," Tahan corrected her. "They are loud, and they ride in a line. They will find nothing. Not yet." He led her to a place the posse would never find, a high meadow hidden by a stand of pine, where a small herd of wild horses, his brother's horses, grazed. There was a simple pile of stones at the edge of the meadow, a grave. Tahan stood before it for a long time. He did not pray. He just stood. "Who is it?" Eliza asked, staying a respectful distance away. "My brother," Tahan said, his back to her. "Catano, he loved these horses. He said they were the high wind, given legs." "What happened?" "He was hunting, alone. The militia came. They said he was a rustler. They said he was stealing cattle. He had one deer on his horse. They did not ask. They shot him." Tahan bent and picked up a small stone, placing it on the pile. "They left him for the vultures. This is the white man's justice. This is the world that is coming for us." He turned to her, his eyes cold. "That is why I hide. That is why I watch. And that is why I should have left you by the river." Eliza had no answer for his grief. She just stood, a witness, her own troubles feeling small and selfish in the face of his. They stayed in the high country for another day, but the world Tahan was hiding from pushed its way in. A sentry found him, his face grim. "They are back," the sentry said, his voice low and angry. "The Iron Men." Tahan's face darkened. He followed the sentry to the edge of the ridge. He looked down at his own camp, and he saw them. They were not soldiers. They were surveyors, and they had planted a new line of bright yellow stakes, not 50 yards from the camp, straight across the main creek that fed the hot spring. They had cut off the water. It was a declaration of war, written in wood and paint. "Grigg," Tahan said, "the name a curse. This is his doing." "What do we do?" the sentry asked. "We cannot let them take the water." "I must talk to them," Tahan said, his mind racing. "There is a man, Finch. He is an interpreter. He works for the railroad, but he has spoken for us before. He understands. He was already planning his route to the railroad camp. A dangerous journey. But he would not get the chance." That night, the tension snapped. The posse, emboldened by the bounty and frustrated at finding no tracks, grew reckless. They rode close to the ridges, close enough to see the smoke from the camp. And they fired. A dozen rifles cracked in the darkness. The bullets whined over the tops of the lodges, thudding into trees. It was not an attack. It was a message. We are here. We know you are here. We are not afraid. Panic erupted in the camp. Horses screamed, children cried. Tahan ran from the rocks, back toward his people. The elder met him at the edge of the camp. His face was like carved stone in the moonlight. "It is done," the elder said, his voice flat. "It was just warning shots." Tahan said, "They are cowards." "They are not cowards," the elder said. "They are testing the fence. And you have given them the excuse. They shoot because they believe a white woman is our prisoner. You have brought this on us. You brought the shadow." "I will send her away," Tahan said. "No." The elder's voice was sharp. "It is too late for that. If they find her wandering, they will say she escaped, and they will burn us. If she stays, they will come in force. There is only one path. You brought her. You will take her. You will leave the camp, and you will draw them after you. You are the watcher. Go. Watch from a distance. Take the fire with you." It was a command, and it was a banishment. Tahan stood for a long moment, the weight of the old man's words settling on him. He had tried to protect the weak, and in doing so, he had endangered everyone. He turned, his face hard, and walked back to the rocks where Eliza was hiding, terrified by the gunfire. She saw him coming, a dark, fast-moving shape. "What is it? What is happening?" she cried. He grabbed her arm, not gently, but not with violence. It was with urgency. "We are leaving," he said. "Leaving back to the town." "No," Tahan said, pulling her toward the hidden horses. "We run, and we do not stop." They ran for 2 days, pushing the horses north and west, into the broken land, away from the Llano. Tahan set a hard pace, moving through dry canyons and over high, rocky mesas. He was a shadow, and he was forcing Eliza Beaumont to become one too. He was drawing the fire, just as the elder had commanded, leading the unseen posse on a desperate, pointless chase. Eliza rode until her bones ached and her mind was numb with exhaustion. The horse he had given her, her own mare Bess, was sure-footed and strong. But Eliza was not. On the 3rd morning, she spoke, her voice cracked and dry. "We cannot just run," she said, pulling her horse to a stop. Tahan wheeled his pony, his face impatient. "To stop is to die. They are behind us." "They will always be behind us unless we go somewhere," she argued, her voice gaining a desperate strength. "I know a place. The monastery of San Isidro. It is 2 days north. The nuns there, they are good. They help people. They helped my mother. They are not part of the town. They are not part of Silas Grigg's world. They will hide us." Tahan's face was skeptical. He had no trust in the white man's God, or his houses, a house of prayer. "They are the worst. They will trade you for a bag of gold." "These women will not," Eliza insisted. "They are outside his reach. Please, Tahan, we need food. We need water. We need a place to think. Running is not a plan. It is a panic." He looked at her, then at the sky. It had changed. The high, pale blue of autumn had been replaced by a low, bruised, yellowish gray. The air was heavy, still, and smelled of ozone. A storm was coming, a bad one. He had no better plan. Running was not a plan. She was right. He nodded, a single, sharp dip of his chin, and turned his horse north. The rain began an hour later. It was not a gentle rain, but a hard, driving sheet of water that turned the canyons to mud and the rocks to slick, dangerous glass. They pushed on, the world reduced to the sound of their horses' hooves and the roar of the wind. By late afternoon, they were in a narrow, high-walled canyon, following the bed of a dry arroyo. Tahan stopped, his head up, sniffing the air like an animal. He looked up at the canyon rim. "What is it?" Eliza shouted over the wind. He did not answer her with words. He grabbed the bridle of her horse and spurred his own up the steep, crumbling canyon wall. Now he yelled. The horses scrambled, panicked, digging their hooves into the soft rock and mud. They fought their way up the incline, slipping, sliding, driven by the sheer urgency in his voice. They reached the rim, a flat expanse of rock, just as the sound reached them. It was not the sound of wind. It was a low, deep roar, like 1,000 stampeding buffalo. The ground beneath them began to tremble. Eliza looked back. The dry arroyo, the path they had been on just seconds before, was gone. In its place, a wall of churning, muddy water, 10 feet high, tore through the canyon, carrying with it boulders and whole trees, a flash flood. If they had been in that canyon for 10 more seconds, they would have been erased. Eliza stared, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. He had saved her life. Again. But they were not safe. The flood had cut them off. The creek they had intended to cross was now a raging brown torrent, 100 yards wide. They were trapped on a shrinking island of rock. "We have to cross," Tahan yelled, pulling his lariat from his pony. "The water will rise higher." He tied one end of the rope around his waist. He looked for a place. He found an old, sturdy cottonwood tree on their side, and another one, barely visible. On the far bank, he would have to swim it. "No," Eliza screamed. "You will not make it." He ignored her. He was already in the water. The current took him, pulling him under. He disappeared. Eliza screamed. Then he surfaced, gasping, 20 yards downstream, fighting the pull, his arms straining. He was a powerful swimmer, but the water was stronger. He was being swept away. Then he found a different current, an eddy. He used it, pushing himself with a desperate strength toward the far bank. He caught a branch, missed, caught another. He pulled himself out of the water, mud-caked and exhausted, and secured the rope to the far cottonwood. He had made a lifeline. He waved to her. "Come." She tied the end of the rope around her own waist. She led the horses to the edge, but they would not go. They reared, terrified. She left them. She stepped into the water. The cold was a shock, a blow that stole her breath. The current was a living thing, a huge, angry hand that grabbed her, pulling her off her feet, tumbling her. She was choking, swallowing mud. She felt the rope go taut, a savage jerk at her waist. She held on, pulling herself along the rope, hand over hand, her knuckles scraping, her lungs on fire. Tahan was there. He reached for her, his hand clamping on her arm. He hauled her onto the bank like a sack of grain. She lay on the mud, coughing, vomiting water, and shivering. They were alive. They were across. But their horses, their supplies, everything was on the other side. Lost. As the water began to crest, Tahan was already scanning the new, violent river, and then he saw it. "What is that?" Eliza said, her voice a raw whisper, following his gaze. Caught in the branches of a half-submerged tree, a piece of wreckage, perhaps from a wagon, was lodged, and clinging to it were 3 small, dark shapes. They were not animals. "Children," Eliza breathed, horrified. "Oh God, they are children." Tahan saw them. His face was grim. This was not his problem. They were a delay. They were a risk. He had to keep moving. He turned away. "No," Eliza grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "We cannot, Tahan. We cannot leave them. You cannot." He looked at her, his face a mask of anger. And in her eyes, he saw not a white woman, but a human being. And he heard the echo of the elder's voice. "Protect the weak." He cursed, a low guttural sound in his own language. He checked the knot of his lariat. He plunged back into the water, this time not to save himself, but to save them. The rescue was a nightmare. The water was full of debris, of dead animals and broken branches. He fought his way to the wreckage. The rope, now tied between the two trees. His only guide. The children were small, Mexican, their faces numb with cold and terror. The oldest was a boy, maybe 7. The other 2 were girls, younger. He tied the rope around the oldest girl and signaled for Eliza to pull. From the bank, she hauled on the rope, her small strength barely enough. Dragging the child through the churning water to safety, he sent the second girl the same way. Finally, he took the boy, the oldest. He was too weak to hold the rope. Tahan held the boy in one arm and pulled himself back along the line with the other. A huge log, an entire tree, broke loose upstream and rushed toward them. Tahan Eliza screamed. He saw it. He had no time. He threw the boy toward the bank, put his head down, and took the blow of the log on his shoulder. Eliza heard the sickening crack. He went under. The boy landed in the mud. Eliza grabbed him, pulling him safe. She stared at the water. Tahan. He surfaced, 10 yards away, his face white with pain. His right arm was hanging at a useless, strange angle. He had dislocated his shoulder, but he was alive. He used his good arm to pull himself to the bank. They found shelter under a rock overhang, the 4 of them, and the 2 small girls Tahan had also pulled from the water, huddled together for warmth. The rain finally slowed to a drizzle. As they sat there, shivering, the oldest boy, who had not said a word, reached into his soaked shirt. He pulled out a folded, waterlogged piece of paper and held it out. He seemed to be giving it to Tahan. Eliza, her hands shaking from cold, took it. "What is this?" She unfolded it. It was a letter, the ink running, but the pencil beneath it was clear. It was in English. "It is from the railroad camp," she said, confused. It is addressed to a man named Finch." Tahan, who was leaning against the rock, his eyes closed in pain, suddenly opened them. "Finch," he said, his voice a low growl. "The interpreter." He held out his good hand. "Give it." Eliza looked at him. It is writing." "I know," he said. He took the paper. His eyes scanned the words, his lips moving slightly. His face, which was already pale, went ashen. "You can read," Eliza whispered, stunned. "A nun," he said, his voice tight, distant. "At a mission in San Antonio. She taught me. She said it would save my soul." He looked back at the paper, his good hand crushing it slightly. "What does it say?" "It is from Grigg," Tahan said, his voice flat. "Dead. To Finch. It says, 'The posse is the distraction. Wait for the signal. The South Store. Where the winter food is, burn it clean. The old man will have to move then. We will have the water.'" The words hung in the damp air, heavier and more toxic than the storm. The man he had planned to negotiate with, the man he had trusted, was a part of the plan, as if summoned by the words. Eliza looked back toward the south, toward the Llano, where his camp was. The storm had broken, and the sky was clearing, and against that new, clean sky, a column of smoke was rising. It was not the small, thin smoke of a cooking fire. It was a thick, black, greasy plume, the smoke of a burning building, the smoke of their winter supplies. "They did it," Eliza whispered. "They are burning their food, while we are here." Tahan did not speak. He just watched the smoke, his face a mask of such cold, terrible rage that Eliza was afraid to breathe. He had taken the fire with him, just as the elder had asked, and Grigg had simply lit another, right at his back. They found the children's village, a small collection of goat herder jacales, a mile away. The family, who had thought their children lost forever, wept with joy. Calling Tahan and Eliza angels, they would be witnesses. That night, Tahan and Eliza were alone again, by a small fire, the distant smoke a smudge on the stars. Tahan's shoulder was a line of agony. He was shaking, not from cold, but from rage and pain. Eliza had found her sodden bag, which had washed up downstream. She pulled out the small, cloth-bound book of poetry. She also had her small pencil. She opened the book to the blank pages in the back. "We have to fix your shoulder," she said, her voice quiet. He nodded, setting his jaw. He told her what to do. She had to put her foot against his chest and pull his arm. Hard. She did it, weeping as he roared in pain. But the joint went back in with a sickening pop. He sat, breathing hard, the sweat pouring off him. She took the strip of cloth from his hand, the one she had bandaged before. It was filthy and bloody from the rope and the flood. She gently unwrapped it. "You were right," Tahan whispered, his voice hoarse, staring at the fire. "About running. It is a panic, and I ran right into his trap." "No," she said, "he set a trap. But we have something he does not." She tore a clean page from the back of her book. "You can read. I can read. He uses paper to tell his lies." She dipped the pencil in the water, then touched it to the page. "We will use it to tell the truth." Tahan looked at her, at the small book, at the pencil. It looked like a child's toy against the violence they had just seen. "We will go to the town," she said, her voice gaining a strange, cold certainty. "Not to the monastery. To the court. We will draw a map of the stakes. We will write down what was in that letter. We will find the family of those children. We will find Isaiah. We will give this to the judge." "Your law," he said, the word a sneer. "It is the only thing we have," she said. She took his wounded hand. She began to clean it again, her touch tender. "He is using the railroad. The iron. That is his power. This," she tapped the book, "this is ours. Truth." He watched her as she tore another strip of cloth to bandage his hand. Her fingers brushed his palm. A small, brief touch. It was not a lover's touch. It was the touch of a partner, an ally. He looked from her face to the small book. He had his doubts, but it was a new path. It was not running. "The iron road," he said, "and a paper book. It is a small shield." "It is a start," Eliza replied, tying the knot. The journey back south was a descent into hell. They were on foot, having lost the horses, and the world was a running river of mud. Tahan's rage had cooled, settling into a hard, cold core of purpose. Eliza Beaumont's desperate plan, the one with the book and the pencil, felt like a child's prayer in a hurricane. They both knew it. They needed to stop the bleeding. The fire at the camp, the burning of the winter stores, was not the end. It was the beginning. "He will not stop," Tahan said, his voice a low rasp. They were hidden in a rocky cleft, looking down at the valley, at the black, smoking scar that had been the storehouse. The rain had started again, a cold, miserable drizzle. "He has cut the water with his stakes. He has burned the food. Now he will send his men to push the old, the women. He will force them out." "We cannot fight 30 men, Eliza whispered, her body shivering. "No," Tahan said. His eyes were not on the camp, but on the canyon that led to it. "But we can stop them from getting there." He had seen it on their way south. The railroad crew, under Griggs' orders, had built a temporary bridge. It was a crude, fast thing, made of raw pine logs, thrown across the deep gulch that cut the valley in two. It was the only way to move wagons, or a large body of men, quickly from the town. It was Griggs' new road. "The bridge," Eliza said, understanding. "If we can stop them from using it. We buy time." Tahan finished. He looked at her, his face grim in the gray light. "Your plan needs time. I will buy it. What will you do?" He did not answer. He just began to walk, moving with a predator's silence along the ridge, back toward the sound of the iron being hammered. The plan was simple, desperate. Tahan had a small horn of black powder, which he kept dry in an oilskin pouch. It was for hunting, for starting fires in wet weather, not for war,
but it would be enough.
You have to cut the supports, Eliza said, her mind working, practical. The main beams, not the top. It has to fall. I know how a bridge works, he said, his voice tight. His shoulder, the one he had dislocated, was a throbbing knot of agony. He could barely lift the arm. And no one gets hurt, she insisted, grabbing his good arm, forcing him to look at her. Tahan, no killing. We are doing this for the law. We are not them. He looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. Her eyes were fierce, terrified, and right. We cut the wood, he said, not the men. Now stay here. Be the lookout. They reached the bridge at the darkest hour, just before the moon would have risen. Had there been a moon? The rain was a constant, cold curtain, muffling their sounds. The bridge was a black, skeletal shape against the churning, muddy water of the gulch below. There were no guards. Silas Grigg was arrogant. He believed the enemy was broken, starving, and running. Eliza took a position in the rocks, 50 yards up the trail, her heart a cold drum against her ribs. She was the watcher. Tahan moved to the bridge. He slid down the muddy bank to the base, to the thick pine supports that were driven into the canyon wall. He worked with his knife and his good hand, his bad arm screaming in protest. He packed the powder deep into a natural cleft in the wood, a place where the support met the rock. He laid a short fuse, which he protected from the rain with his own body and the last of his oilskin. He was tamping it down when he heard it. It was not a sound Eliza would have noticed. It was not the rain, or the river. It was the click of a shod horse stepping on stone, immediately muffled. He froze. He looked up, a shadow among shadows. He could see nothing. He finished his work. He was ready to light the fuse when the voice came.
Right there. Hold it. Savage.
A lantern flared, cutting the dark. 4 men, 4 rifles. They were a patrol, and they had come from the other direction, from the camp, not the town. Eliza saw the light. Her breath stopped. She saw the men, their long coats slick with rain, their guns all pointed at the man at the base of the bridge. Tahan, she screamed, a useless, terrified cry. The shot cracked through the night, but it was not aimed at Tahan. It was aimed at Eliza. The bullet sparked off the rock above her head, sending chips of stone into her face.
Run!
Eliza Tahan roared. He did not run. He lunged for the fuse. He had no spark. The rifleman had him pinned. He was trapped. Then he did the only thing he could. He moved. He ran, not away, but along the riverbank, away from Eliza, pulling their fire.
He is getting away, one shouted.
The girl, another yelled.
Grigg wants the girl.
2 of them stayed, their rifles on Tahan, who was now a moving target in the rocks. The other 2 spurred their horses up the trail, toward the sound of Eliza's scream. She ran. She scrambled up the rocky path, away from the bridge, away from the men. She heard the horses crashing through the brush behind her, the men shouting. Tahan heard it too. He was cornered, a shallow overhang at his back, 2 rifles on him. He heard Eliza's panicked, slipping sounds. He heard the men laughing as they chased her. He had one choice. He had sacrificed his camp for her. Now he would sacrifice himself. He stepped out from the rock.
I am here,
he shouted, his voice a battle cry. He threw a rock at the men below him, a useless, defiant gesture. It worked. Forget the girl. Get him, the man with the lantern roared. He is the one trying to blow the bridge. Get him. $10 gold. The 2 riders who had been chasing Eliza stopped. They turned, their greed stronger than their orders. They thundered back down the trail. Eliza kept running, not daring to look back, choking on sobs of rain and terror. Tahan did not run. He fought. As the men closed in, he met them. He was 1 man with 1 good arm, against 4. He moved like a whirlwind, using their own horses against them, a blur of motion in the lantern light. He disarmed 1, pulled another from his horse, but it was not a fight he could win. The butt of a rifle caught him on his bad shoulder, the pain so white and absolute it sent him to his knees. They were on him then, boots and fists, the savage, grunting sounds of men who enjoyed their work. They beat him until he was still, his face in the mud. From the ridge, a half-mile away, Eliza stopped. She had hidden herself in a tangle of fallen trees. She watched as the men hauled Tahan to his feet. He was a bloody, broken shape, but he was standing. They tied his hands behind his back, rough and tight. And then, as she watched, the small, hidden spark Tahan had left behind finally found the powder. The explosion was not large. It was a dull, heavy whump, followed by the sharp crack of splintering wood. The bridge groaned. It sagged, the main support giving way. It did not fall into the canyon, but it was broken, twisted, and utterly impassable. The men stared at it, furious. He did it, he blew the bridge. "You are a dead man," the patrol leader said, shoving Tahan forward. "A dead man." They brought him back to San Miguel Crossing at dawn, parading him down the main street. Silas Grigg was waiting on the porch of the sheriff's office, a cup of coffee in his hand, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. The interpreter, Finch, stood beside him, looking pale. "Well, well," Silas said, as they threw Tahan onto the wooden steps. "Look what the rain washed in. The hero." Tahan just lay there, breathing, his eyes full of a silent, burning hatred. He was trying to blow the bridge. Mr. Grigg, the patrol leader, said, "Caught him in the act. He had the girl with him. She got away." "She got away," Silas mused, as if it were a minor detail. "No matter. She will turn up. But this is sabotage." He nudged Tahan with his boot. "This is destruction of property. This is terrorism." He turned to the interpreter. "Finch, you were at the camp, were you not? You spoke to this animal." Finch licked his lips, his eyes darting to the crowd that was gathering. "Yes, Mr. Grigg, I tried. I offered them peace. I offered them food." "And what did he say?" Silas asked, his voice leading the witness. He said he would burn the iron road," Finch stammered. "The lie coming easier now. He said he had the girl. He said he would not let her go. He said he would kill her before he gave her back." A gasp went through the crowd. "So," Silas said, turning to the sheriff, "you have your witness, kidnapping, threats, and now sabotage. I would say that is enough to build a gallows. Lock him up. We will have a trial at noon." Eliza had crept into town like a ghost, her face hidden by a borrowed shawl. She had watched the terrible, staged scene. She had seen Tahan, bloody and bound. She had heard the lies. She ran. She ran to the only two people in town who might have a soul left. She found Reverend Hale in the white-steepled church, arranging flowers. "Reverend," she pleaded, her voice a raw whisper, "you must help. They are lying. I was not kidnapped. I ran. He saved me. He is a good man." The Reverend stopped his work. He turned, his face a mask of pained sorrow. "Eliza, my child, we all prayed for your safe return." "I do not need prayers," she hissed. "I need a witness. You have to come to the court. You have to tell them the truth about Silas Grigg." Reverend Hale's hands fluttered, touching the cross at his neck. "My dear, I cannot. It is not my place. I spoke to Mr. Grigg this morning. He has been most generous. He has pledged the full amount for a new church roof. He said he would not want to see a tragedy befall the one we have." Eliza stared at him, her stomach turning to ice. He was a coward. He had been bought. She left him. She ran to the forge. Isaiah was working, the sound of his hammer ringing like a desperate bell. "Isaiah," she said, stumbling into the smoky building. "Please, they are going to hang him. You know Grigg. You know his violence. You have to speak." Isaiah stopped, the hammer held in midair. He looked at her, his one good eye filled with a deep, profound sadness. He did not speak. He just gestured with his head. In the corner of the forge sat 3 new, heavy iron doors, the kind used for jail cells. Mr. Grigg placed an order, Isaiah said, his voice a low rumble, a large one. For the new jail. He said it is good. Steady work. He said as long as a man is a good, steady worker, he will have nothing to fear in this town. He looked away from her, back at the fire. I cannot help you, girl. I got my own skin to protect. You should do the same. Go home. Beg Mr. Grigg's forgiveness. It is the only way. Eliza backed out of the forge, the heat and the smell of defeat choking her. She was alone. Hale was bought. Isaiah was threatened. Tahan was in a cell. The lie was winning. She stood in the alley, the rain dripping from her hair, her body numb with cold and fear. She could run, she could get a horse and just ride until this whole town was a bad dream. It was the smart thing to do, the safe thing. She thought of Tahan, turning his back to her in the hot spring, a gesture of profound, unexpected respect. She thought of him throwing the Mexican boy to safety, taking the blow of the log on himself. She thought of him shouting, running into the dark, to save her. He had saved her 3 times. She pulled the small, waterlogged book of poetry from her pocket. The cover was ruined, but the pages inside were still there. The page with the words from Grigg's letter, the map she had drawn of the stakes, the truth. Her fear was a cold, hard stone in her gut. But the truth was a fire. He had sacrificed his freedom for her. She would not let him sacrifice his life. She straightened her shoulders, pushed her wet hair back from her face, and walked out of the alley. She was not running. She was walking straight toward the courthouse, for the trial at noon. The trial, if it could be called such a thing, began at noon. It was not held in a courthouse, but in the large, smoky main room of the saloon, the only space big enough. Judge Barnaby, a small man with a perpetually damp brow, sat behind a whiskey-stained poker table. The room was not a place of law. It was a cage. It was packed, standing room only, with railroad men and Silas Grigg's militia. Their gun belts were heavy, and the air was thick with the smell of wet wool, tobacco, and threat. Tahan was dragged in, his hands still bound. He was bruised, his face swollen, his shirt a map of dried blood and mud. But he was not broken. He stood before the table, his back straight, his eyes fixed on Silas Grigg. He was a pillar of defiance in a room built on lies. The charges are severe, Judge Barnaby stammered, reading from a piece of paper that shook in his hand. Kidnapping of a minor, Miss Eliza Beaumont, malicious destruction of railroad property, threatening a witness, arson. A hanging offense on any one count, Silas Grigg said, his voice calm. He was not on trial. He was the prosecutor and the audience. He sat in a chair, his legs crossed. The picture of civic duty. We have a witness. Mr. Finch. Finch, the interpreter, was pushed forward. He looked sick. Mr. Grigg, the judge asked, is this necessary? The man was caught. It is very necessary, Silas said smoothly. The people must hear the truth. Finch, tell us what the savage said. Finch licked his lips. He would not look at Tahan. He looked at the floor. He said he had the girl, that he had taken her. He said he would kill her before he gave her back. He said he would burn the whole railroad, the whole town. He hated us. And the bridge, Grigg prompted. He said it was his first blow, Finch whispered, that he would cut us off and starve us out. There you have it, Grigg said, spreading his hands to the room. A confession, Judge. Judge Barnaby swallowed. He looked at the silent, bloody man before him. He looked at the armed, angry crowd. Mr. Tahan, do you have anything to say in your defense? Tahan looked at him, a look of such profound contempt that the judge flinched. He said nothing. Then I find I have no choice. The judge began. I do. The voice was not loud. It was clear, it was cold, and it cut through the smoke and the lies like a clean knife. The crowd turned. Eliza Beaumont stood in the doorway. She was not the girl who had run. She was soaked. Her dress was torn and caked in mud, and there were bruises on her face from her fall on the ridge, but her hair was pushed back, and her eyes were burning. She looked like a drowned thing that had come back from the river, seeking judgment. Silas Grigg stood up, his face a mask of shock.
"Eliza, my dear, you are safe." He moved toward her.
She held up her hand, and the motion stopped him cold.
"Do not touch me,"
she said. She walked forward, through the crowd of silent, stunned men, until she stood at the table, between Tahan and the judge. "You are here to give evidence on the kidnapping, child," the judge asked, his voice full of a relieved, fatherly tone. "I am here to stop one." Eliza said, "My name is Eliza Beaumont. I was not kidnapped by this man." She pointed to Tahan. "I was saved by him. I am a prisoner. Yes, but not his. I am a prisoner of Mr. Silas Grigg." A bomb had gone off in the room. The silence was absolute.
"She is hysterical,"
Silas said, his voice tight, grasping.
"The poor thing is terrified."
"I am not terrified," Eliza said, turning to face him. "Not anymore. You told my stepfather you would take his debt in trade for me. You forced him to sign a betrothal contract. I heard it. Through the wall. I ran because I would rather die on the prairie than be your wife. That is the truth." She turned back to the judge. She pulled the small, waterlogged book from her pocket. It was a pathetic, ruined thing. "This is my evidence." Silas laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "A book of poetry has your mind broken, my dear."
"This is a record,"
she said, her voice shaking but growing stronger. She opened it to the back pages. "This is a map of the new survey stakes Mr. Grigg had placed, the ones that cut off the Comanche camp from its water. Illegally. He wanted to force them out so he could take the land. He wanted the spring." She flipped a page. "And this is a copy of a letter. A letter from Mr. Grigg to Mr. Finch." She looked at Finch, who had gone the color of ash. "It orders him to wait for the posse as a distraction, and then to burn the Comanche winter stores. To burn it clean." It was not Tahan who committed arson. It was Silas Grigg.
"Lies," Grigg roared. "This is a fantasy, a child scribbling. Where is this so-called letter?"
"It is here." The voice came from the door. A man, a simple Mexican goat herder, stood there. He was holding his hat in his hands. Behind him were his 3 children, the 2 small girls and the boy. They were clean, but their eyes were huge. "The water. It brought it to us," the man said, walking forward. He placed the muddy, warped, but still legible letter on the judge's table. "But that is not why we are here. We are here." He put his hands on his son's shoulders. "Because our children were in the flood. The river took them." He pointed, first at Tahan. "This man, he jumped in the water. It was a torrent. He swam. He tied a rope. He saved them." He dislocated his shoulder, but he saved them. He pointed at Eliza. "And this woman, she pulled them to the bank. They are alive because of these 2. The goat herder looked at the judge. "I do not know your laws, Senor, but these are not the actions of killers. These are the actions of good people." The room was no longer a solid cage. It had cracks. Men were murmuring, looking at Grigg, then at the children, then at Tahan. "Reverend Hale," Eliza's voice was sharp. "You are here. You are a man of God. You teach us not to bear false witness. Tell them what you know of Silas Grigg. Tell them of the betrothal." The Reverend, who had been hiding in the back, was suddenly visible. He stepped forward, his face pale, his hands twisting. He looked at Silas, who was staring at him with a look of pure, cold menace. "Reverend," Silas said, his voice a low warning. "The new roof." Haley looked at the cross around his neck. He looked at Tahan. "Bloody and bound, a man's life, an oath before God. It is worth more than a roof." He spoke to the judge. She is right. She is not his wife. The betrothal it was an arrangement of debt. It was not a holy union. It was wrong. Isaiah Eliza called to the back of the room. The blacksmith had been standing by the door, his great arms crossed. He did not move. Isaiah, please, Eliza begged. Tell them. Isaiah walked forward. He did not look at the judge. He walked until he was standing directly in front of Silas Grigg. You ordered a brand, Isaiah said, his voice a low rumble. A liar's brand, to mark land that was not yours. I have no idea what you are talking about, Silas sneered. I refused, Isaiah continued, as if Grigg had not spoken. And your men, the two in the back, the ones who work for the railroad, they met me in the alley. They beat me with a chain. A gasp went through the room. This was not an Indian. This was not a child. This was Isaiah, the smith, their smith. Finch broke the letter, the children, the Reverend Isaiah. It was too much. The cage of lies was collapsing. It was not supposed to be like this, he shrieked, tears running down his face. He just wanted to scare them, the fire. It was just to make them move. He said no one would be hurt, he just wanted the water. It was just business. He had confessed. He had admitted to the arson. He had implicated Grigg. Silas Grigg saw the room turn against him. The judge was staring, mouth open. The townsfolk were looking at him with horror. He had lost. So he changed the game. Enough, he roared, his voice so loud it shook the glasses on the bar. He kicked his chair back and jumped onto the poker table, towering over them all. Are you all blind? Are you insane? You will listen to this collection of traitors, a hysterical, ungrateful woman, a cowardly preacher, a lying smith, a pack of foreigners. You will take their word over mine. He pointed at Tahan. He is the enemy. He is a savage. He is a Comanche. He blew up our bridge. He destroyed our property. He wants to kill us all. What about our town? What about the honor of a white woman, lured from her home? What about the safety of your children? He was a master. He was turning the tide back, using their deepest fears. I say we stop this farce, he shouted, pulling a pistol from his belt. I say we give him a real trial, a miner's trial. We hang him now. Hang him, his core men. The militia surged forward, their own guns appearing. They grabbed for Tahan. Hold! The voice was not from the town. It was from the door. A man in overalls, the railroad foreman, stood there. He was flanked by 20 railroad workers. They were not Grigg's thugs. They were the spike drivers, the hammer wielders. They held pickaxes and shovels. We heard the noise. The foreman said, his voice hard. Mr. Grigg, you are not the railroad. You are just the money. He pointed at Tahan. I was at that flood. Me and my crew. We were trapped on the south bank. We would have been swept away. That man, he showed us the high path. He led us to safety. He saved a dozen of our lives. He did not ask for money. He just did it. He is not our enemy. He looked at Grigg's men, then at his own. We are builders. We are not lynchers. We will not stand by and watch this. Put the guns away. The saloon was a powder keg. Grigg's men with their guns. The railroad crew with their tools. The townsfolk were trapped between them. Judge Barnaby saw his life flash before his eyes. He slammed his gavel, a small whiskey glass, on the table. Order this. This is not a trial. This is chaos. He was terrified, but he saw his one path to survival. There is new testimony, conflicting testimony. I cannot render judgment. I am not qualified. This matter must be bound over for a full hearing by a circuit judge from the state. This court is adjourned. You coward, Silas roared, but it was too late. The prisoner, the judge shouted, will be held in the county jail until the circuit judge arrives next month, deputy. Take him. Tahan was grabbed, not by Grigg's men, but by the sheriff's deputy, who hauled him out a back door. Silas, seeing his victory, his perfect, swift justice, crumble. was shaking with rage. He stormed out of the saloon, his men following him like a dark cloud. That night, the saloon was quiet. Silas Griggs sat at a table with his 4 most loyal men, the patrol leader among them. "A month," Silas said, his voice a low, lethal hiss. "That old fool bought him a month. We do not have a month. That letter is in an evidence bag. Those children are still here. The bridge is still broken. The camp, the burn marks. It is all evidence." He drank his whiskey in one swallow. Evidence has a way of disappearing. He looked at his patrol leader. "That circuit judge. When he gets here, I want him to find nothing. No letter, no witnesses, no camp. Burn it all. Burn the camp to the bedrock. And that bridge. That is a new problem. Is it not?" Silas Griggs did not believe in patience. He did not believe in the slow, grinding wheels of the law he had just set in motion. He believed in fire, and he believed in fear. The circuit judge was a problem, a delay that gave truth time to set its roots. Griggs' plan had always been to get the land, and the failed trial had only made the need more urgent. He had to change the story, completely and irrevocably. He needed a bigger, simpler crime. He needed a tragedy that would unite the entire territory against the Comanche threat. In the dead of night, he and his 4 most loyal men did not ride to the jail. They rode to the railroad yard. They overpowered the single-night watchman, unlocked the explosives shed, and loaded a handcar with 3 crates of dynamite. This was not the black powder Tahan had used. This was the railroad's own medicine, the earth-shattering power they used to carve through mountains. His new plan was brutally simple. He would not just burn an empty camp. He would blow the new San Miguel trestle, the magnificent, spidery iron bridge that was the county's pride. He would do it at sunrise, just as the 503 freight train, the one carrying supplies for the entire forward line, was making its crossing. He would leave Tahan's knife, or some other piece of evidence. At the scene, it would be a massacre. It would be an act of war. And in the ashes, no one would ever listen to a single word from a hysterical girl or a Mexican goat herder. He would be a hero, leading the righteous charge against the savages who had done it. Eliza Beaumont knew he would not wait. She, Isaiah, and the railroad foreman, a hard, fair man named Shaw, met in the back room of the forge. The air was thick with the smell of coal and urgency. "He's not a man who sits," Isaiah rumbled, his big hands clenched. "He lost in that room. He will not lose again." "He has to silence the witnesses," Shaw said, his face grim. "The children, the letter, the camp, but most of all, Tahan. The judge ordered Tahan held, but the deputy is moving him to the federal lockup in Tucson." "There is no federal lockup in Tucson." "It is a transport," Eliza said, her blood cold. "A transport to an ambush. They are going to kill him on the road." "Then we stop the transport," Isaiah said. "No bloodshed," Eliza insisted, her eyes locking with his. "We are not him. We do it the law's way." They moved before dawn. The transport was a simple wagon, with Tahan shackled inside and 2 deputies, the same ones who had been in the saloon, on the driver's bench. They were nervous. Their route led through a narrow, wooded cut. It was there they found the road blocked by a massive, freshly fallen pine tree. "What in the hell?" the lead deputy said, pulling the horses up. As they climbed down, rifles in hand, Shaw and a dozen of his railroad workers stepped out from the trees. They were unarmed. They held lanterns. "Gentlemen," Shaw said, his voice calm, "we are just here to talk." The deputies raised their rifles. "This is official business, stand back." "We cannot do that," a new voice said. Eliza stepped out, holding a lantern of her own. "Deputy Miller, I am Eliza Beaumont, the woman he supposedly kidnapped. I am telling you, as I told the judge, that man is innocent. You know what Griggs is. You know what you are doing is murder." "Get back," Miss the deputy stammered, his face slick with sweat. "I will not. You are transporting him to his death. We are here to see he gets his day with the circuit judge. That is all."
"He is a prisoner."
"Then let me speak to him," she said. She walked toward the wagon, the lantern held high. The deputy did not shoot her. "Tahan," she called, her voice clear in the cold air. A scraping sound from inside. "I am here, Eliza." His voice was low, but steady. "The deputies are afraid. Tell them the truth." "The truth," Tahan's voice said, "is that Silas Grigg burned my camp. He tried to have me killed. He is trying again, right now, using you. I saved your railroad crew. Shaw, I saved those children. I saved him on the bridge. I am not the enemy here." The deputies looked at each other. They had been in the saloon. They had heard the testimony. They were not evil men. They were just weak, on the wrong side of a powerful man. Isaiah stepped from the shadows. He was not armed. He just looked at the deputies. The lead deputy let out a long breath. He lowered his rifle. He walked to the back of the wagon, pulled a key from his pocket, and unlocked the door. We were ambushed," he said, his voice quiet. "We were outnumbered. The prisoner was taken from us." He looked at Shaw.
"Go, and God help us all."
As Isaiah used his bolt cutters to free Tahan from the shackles, a horse thundered down the road. It was one of Shaw's men, his face white with panic.
"The yard. He hit the yard," the man screamed. "Grigg, he's got dynamite. He is headed for the trestle. The 503 is due at sunrise."
Tahan was on his feet, the shackles falling away. He looked at Shaw. "How long?"
"Sunrise is in 20 minutes,
Shaw said, his voice like stone. "The train is on time. We cannot stop it. There is no telegraph line." "Then we stop him," Tahan said. He grabbed the side of the wagon, his body still a mass of bruises, his shoulder and side on fire. "Horses, now." The San Miguel trestle was a monument to the New Age, a black iron skeleton 150 feet high, spanning the deep canyon. As they rode up, the first light of dawn broke, a sliver of blood red on the horizon. The air was full of mist, rising from the river below. And they saw them. 3 figures, Silas Grigg and his 2 most loyal men. They were on the trestle, halfway across, strapping a crate to the central support beam. "The train," Shaw yelled, pointing down the tracks. A plume of smoke, a single, long whistle, echoing in the canyon. It was coming. "We have to stop him," Eliza cried.
"Shaw, take your men. Make noise. Distract them," Tahan commanded, sliding from the horse. "Isaiah, cover us. They will not see me coming."
Shaw and his men charged, running along the tracks, shouting. Grigg's men looked up, startled. One of them raised a rifle. But Tahan was gone. He was not on the tracks. He had swung himself over the side, onto the narrow, icy iron beams under the rails. He moved like a shadow, his bare feet gripping the metal, his wounded body forgotten, driven by a singular, cold purpose. He was moving toward the dynamite. Eliza watched him go. Then she saw it, a thin black wire snaking from the dynamite crate back along the beam, toward the far side of the canyon, where one of Grigg's men knelt by a plunger box. She was not a warrior. She was not a climber, but she saw the wire. She knew what it was. She ran out onto the trestle, a tiny, determined figure, her feet ringing on the iron. Grigg's man saw her coming. He shouted, but she did not stop. He left the plunger and ran to intercept her. The train whistle was a scream now. The tracks themselves had begun to hum. High above the river, Tahan reached the crate. He saw the bundle of fuses, the blasting caps, all wired together. His fingers, raw and bloody, began to tear at them. Silas Grigg looked down, saw the shadow moving under his feet. His eyes went wide with rage. "You!" he roared, and he ran along the narrow central maintenance beam, directly toward Tahan. Eliza saw the man coming for her. He was big. He was laughing. She did not stop. She pulled the small knife from her boot, the one Isaiah had given her. The man grabbed her. She did not fight him. She fell, rolling, and slashed at the wire. She cut it. She cut it again. The man with the plunger, seeing his partner struggling, slammed his hand down. Nothing. Tahan tore the last fuse free. He looked up through the railroad ties and saw the black underbelly of the locomotive as it roared over his head. The trestle shook, a deafening, terrifying vibration, but it held. He pulled himself up onto the main beam, exhausted, just as the last car passed. Silas was there, waiting for him. They stood on a single beam, 1 foot wide, the mists of the canyon swirling 150 feet below.
You cannot stop me,
Silas hissed, his face a mask of insane rage.
This is my land, my future.
He lunged, not with a gun, but with his bare hands. Tahan, weaker, but far more balanced, met him. It was not a fight. It was a desperate dance. Tahan deflected. He pivoted. Silas, in his heavy, expensive boots, was clumsy. He was all rage. He swung, missed, and his own momentum betrayed him. His boot heel slipped on the damp iron. He windmilled his arms, his eyes wide with sudden, bottomless terror. He grabbed for the beam, missed, and then he was falling. He fell 1 foot, a hand, hard as iron, clamped onto his wrist. Tahan had him. He held Silas over the void, his own wounded arm shaking with the strain, his feet braced on the beam. Silas stared up, his arrogance shattered, replaced by disbelief. Why, he gasped, his voice a child's whisper. Tahan looked at the man who had taken everything from him. "This is not the law," he said, his voice a raw rasp. He began to pull, his muscles screaming. He hauled Silas up. Silas's hand found the beam. His other hand grabbed Tahan's arm. Tahan was grunting, pulling him to safety. And as he did, Silas's free hand moved, a flicker of metal from his sleeve, a small, hidden knife. He stabbed Tahan in the side, a low, vicious, twisting thrust. "You fool!" he spat. Tahan roared, a sound of pure agony, but his grip did not loosen. Silas. Isaiah's voice. He was at the end of the trestle, his rifle at his shoulder. He had seen the betrayal. He fired. The shot cracked, echoing. It did not hit Silas's heart. It hit his shoulder, the one holding the knife. The impact was a brutal, physical shock. The knife clattered onto the iron. Silas's hand, the one holding the beam, went slack. He looked at Tahan, his mouth open, and then, without a sound, his eyes rolled back, and he fell, unconscious, a dead weight, into the misty canyon below. The train was gone. The only sound was the wind, the river, and Tahan's ragged breathing. Eliza ran to him, helped by Shaw. He was on his knees, clutching the new wound in his side. And then they all heard it, the sound of people. At the far end of the trestle, the townsfolk, woken by the explosion and the chase, had gathered. Reverend Hale was there. The goat herder and his children were there. The other railroad men were there. They had seen it. They had seen Tahan go under the tracks. They had seen Eliza cut the wire. They had seen Tahan save the man who was trying to kill him. They had seen the betrayal. Tahan stood, helped by Isaiah and Eliza. He was bloody, wounded, but he was not a prisoner. He was the man who had held the bridge. He had saved them all. The revolution was not a bang. It was the click of a rifle, and the silence that followed. The crowd, the town, the very land, was changed. The silence that fell over the trestle was heavier than the iron, thicker than the mist rising from the canyon floor. The train was gone, its distant whistle a fading cry. The only sounds were the wind, the river far below, and the ragged, agonizing sound of Tahan breathing as he knelt on the iron, his hand clamped to the new wound in his side. Eliza Beaumont and Isaiah, the blacksmith, reached him at the same time. Isaiah was a mountain of quiet strength, and he put his arm around Tahan's back, taking his weight. "I see it," Isaiah rumbled, his voice thick. "It is a bad one." "We have to get him down," Eliza said, her voice shaking, but her hands were steady as she pressed her own shawl against the bleeding. At the end of the trestle, the crowd of townsfolk stood frozen, a collection of pale, stunned faces in the raw morning light. They had seen it all. They had seen the rescue, the selflessness, the betrayal. Shaw, the railroad foreman, was the first to move. His face was like carved stone. He looked at the broken trestle, at the wounded man, and at the crowd. He was a man of action, not law, but in this moment, he was the only law that mattered.
"Some of you,"
he shouted, his voice a rasp.
"Get down to the river. Find him. He does not get away. He does not die. Not until a judge says so."
Several of the railroad men, his own crew, nodded and began to scramble down the steep, rocky slope of the canyon. They found Silas Grigg 10 minutes later. He was not dead. He had fallen into a deep pool of slow-moving water, his fall broken by a pine tree. He was unconscious, his shoulders shattered by Isaiah's bullet, and his body was a broken, twisted map of pain. He was alive. They hauled him up, a pathetic, wet bundle, and laid him on the ground not 10 feet from where Tahan sat, being tended by Eliza. The contrast was absolute. The villain, broken and unconscious. The hero, bleeding but upright, surrounded by the very people who had once hunted him. The journey back to town was a strange, silent parade. They did not put Tahan in the jail. They took him to the small room behind the mercantile, Eliza's room, and the town doctor, a man who had been conspicuously absent, was summoned, and he obeyed. The circuit judge arrived 2 days later, a stern man named Hayes, who had expected to preside over a simple land dispute and instead walked into a revolution. His first act was to convene a proper hearing. His second was to demand the testimony of Mr. Finch. The interpreter, who had been hiding in his room at the saloon, was brought in under guard. He did not need to be questioned. The moment he saw Judge Hayes, a man who represented a power far greater than Silas Grigg, he collapsed. Finch wept. He confessed everything. He told the court in a high, thin, desperate voice about the letter. He told them about the plan to burn the winter stores, to starve the Comanche out. He told them about the pressure from Grigg, the threats, the bribes, and he told them about the first trial, the lies Grigg had forced him to tell, the story of the kidnapping that he knew was false. He wanted the water. "Your Honor," Finch cried, his hands twisting. He just wanted the water. He said no one would get hurt. He just wanted the land for the railroad spur. It was just business. The confession hung in the air, a poison finally drawn. Silas Grigg, strapped to a bed, his body broken, his face a mask of pale, sweating rage, was formally charged. He was charged with arson, with conspiracy to commit murder, with perjury, and with the attempted destruction of railroad property. He would be transported to a federal prison to await a federal trial. His power in San Miguel Crossing, the power he had built from lies and iron, was gone. The next day, Judge Hayes, Shaw, and Isaiah, along with a delegation of townsfolk, rode out to the Comanche camp. Tahan was not well enough to ride, but Eliza went in his place. She stood beside the elder as the judge spoke. "The survey lines drawn by Mr. Grigg are null and void," Judge Hayes announced, his voice carrying in the clean air. "The court recognizes the prior claim and traditional rights of this community to the Llano Spring. New markers will be set." The old, bright yellow stakes were pulled from the ground by the very railroad men who had planted them. In their place, they set new markers, heavy stones carted out from the town. Shaw, the railroad foreman, set the first one. The elder set the second. It was not a treaty. It was an agreement, sealed by shared trauma and a new, fragile respect. Then Isaiah stepped forward. He was holding his hat, and in it was a collection of paper money and coin. "Elder," he rumbled, holding the hat out, "the town, the men at the forge, the railroad crew, we know what was done. About the storehouse, the fire." He looked uncomfortable, his eyes on the ground. This is to rebuild it. It is an apology. We are ashamed of the part we played, of our silence." The elder did not take the hat. He looked at Isaiah, a long, searching look. Then he nodded, a slow, graceful gesture. "The smoke of that fire is gone. We will build a new one, together." That evening, Eliza returned to Tahan. The wound in his side was bad, but the doctor said the knife had missed his vital organs. He was weak, but the fever had broken. He was sitting on the edge of the small bed. You should not be here," he said, his voice low. It was still improper. A white woman in a man's room, a Comanche man at that. "The town is watching," Eliza said, a small, tired smile on her face. "But they are not watching with hatred anymore. They are curious and grateful. The doctor said you need to clean the wound, that the water, the spring, would be good for it." He nodded. He could not do it alone. They walked to the hot spring in the twilight. A slow journey, Tahan leaning heavily on her. The camp was quiet, the sounds of rebuilding already beginning. But the spring itself was as it had been. It was theirs. He stood at the edge of the water, the steam rising around him, obscuring him. She heard him unwrap the bandages, the sound of a pained, indrawn breath as he eased himself into the healing, sulphurous water. Eliza sat on a rock, on the bank, not looking, but listening. She was not a prisoner. She was not a victim. She was not afraid. "I smelled it," she said, her voice soft. "When I was on the ridge, before the trestle, I smelled the sage." She heard him shift in the water. "It is the smell of this land. It is always here." "No," she said, "it was the smell of your coat, the one you gave me. The first night." She finally looked, and he was visible through the steam, his back to her, the water up to his shoulders. I thought it was the coat that smelled like that, but it was not. It was you. It was the sweetest scent." He turned, his face half hidden in the steam, his black hair wet and slicked back. He looked at her, and his eyes, in the fading light, held a warmth she had never seen. "It is the scent of home," he said. The elder appeared, silent as the mist. He did not speak to them, but he walked to the edge of the water and held a bundle of dried sage in his hand. He lit it, and the sharp, clean smoke, the smoke of cleansing, drifted over the water, over Tahan, and over Eliza. "The fire of greed is an ugly thing," the old man said, his voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "But the smoke of healing is older. When two people learn the language of the water and of the wind, they learn to understand each other without words. You have done this." He placed the smoking bundle on a rock and was gone, as quietly as he had come. Tahan moved in the water, coming closer to the bank where she sat. He did not try to hide his wounds. He held out his good hand, the one that was not bandaged, the one she had first tended. She put her hand in his. His skin was hot from the water, and wet. "You saved my life," he whispered. "You saved mine," she replied, more than once. "Silas, on the trestle, I held him. I wanted to let him go. His voice was a confession." "But you did not," she said, her fingers tightening around his. "That is the difference. That is why we are here, and he is gone." He looked at their joined hands. He was a man of the earth, of horses and the wind. She was a woman of books and of paper. They should not have worked, but they had. He pulled her hand gently, not asking her to join him in the water, but just to be closer. She knelt on the bank, her dress dampening in the mist. His wet hair brushed her arm. Her own hair was damp from the steam. He did not kiss her. He just held her hand, as if he were holding a rare, fragile bird. He looked at her face, and he saw not a white woman, but just Eliza. The elders said he would have a ceremony, to thank the water, to welcome you. I am not leaving, Eliza said. It was a simple statement of fact. I know, Tahan said. He lifted her hand, the one he was holding, and he pressed his lips to the back of it, a gesture of profound, gentle respect, a promise of peace. It was not the act of a savage. It was the act of a man who had chosen. 1 year later, the wind still moved over the plains of the Llano, but the air was different. The sound of the iron railroad was no longer a threat. It was a distant, rhythmic fact of life, like the river or the sun. The sounds that now defined the valley were the calls of horses, the quiet work of men building with wood instead of tearing it down, and the clear, high voices of children. The land had not forgotten the blood, but it was learning to grow grass over the scars. In the high meadow, where his brother's grave lay marked by its simple pile of stones, Tahan was no longer just a watcher. He was a teacher. The meadow was not a place of mourning. It was a school. He stood in the center of a wide ring of horses, his own herd now, bred with the wild stock, and he was teaching. His students were a mix of Comanche boys and, surprisingly, 2 sons of railroad men sent by Shaw. But his prized pupil was Mateo, the goat herder's son, the boy he had pulled from the flash flood. Tahan was teaching him to read the earth. The wind is from the north, Tahan said, his voice quiet, calm, but the deer will be on the south ridge. Why? Mateo, who was now 8 years old and sat on a fast Comanche pony as if he had been born there, squinted at the sky. Because the shadow is long, and the south ridge is warm. They will sleep in the sun. Tahan nodded, a rare, small smile touching his lips. He had protected the weak. Now, he was making them strong. Down by the hot spring, in a small, sturdy cabin built of pine and sealed with river clay, Eliza Beaumont was also teaching. Her small clinic, the healing room, was now a permanent fixture. It was a place where the lines of the world blurred and disappeared. A nun from the San Isidro Monastery, the very place Eliza had been fleeing toward, now rode in once a month. Her name was Sister Teresa, and she and Eliza had become collaborators. Eliza had her mother's knowledge of herbs, and the sister had a bag full of scalpels, carbolic acid, and sutures. Together, they had built a bridge between 2 worlds of medicine. Eliza's clear, neat handwriting was everywhere, labeling jars of dried sage, yarrow, and willow bark. She was teaching the Comanche women the principles of lye soap and boiled water, and they, in turn, were teaching her the deep, old remedies of the prairie. The news from the outside world came, as it always did, on paper. Reverend Hale, who had found his courage in the saloon and never lost it again, rode out from town with a copy of the Santa Fe Register, which was already 2 weeks old. He sat with Eliza and Tahan by the spring, the paper folded on his knee. "It is official," the Reverend said, his voice clear. "Silas Grigg was tried by the state court. Not here, not by us." They did not lynch him. Tahan said it was a statement of fact, one that held a deep, quiet importance. "No," Hale said. "He was given the law, the same law he tried to twist. The state found him guilty. He put on his spectacles and read from the column. Found guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit arson, bribery of a public official, coercion and threat of violence in the matter of a false marriage contract, and attempted destruction of federal property, to wit, the San Miguel trestle. He was sentenced to 20 years in the federal prison at Leavenworth. He will not be seen again." Silence settled over them. It was not the silence of celebration. It was the silence of a heavy stone being set down. At last, Reverend Hale folded the paper, then smiled. They also printed another piece, from a local contributor. He turned the page. "Oh, no," Eliza said, her face coloring. Tahan looked at her, a question in his eyes. "They printed your letter, Miss Eliza," Hale said, his voice full of pride. He cleared his throat. "It is titled, 'On the Matter of the San Miguel Line.'" He read her words aloud. "People of this territory speak of freedom as a privilege to be guarded, as a fence to be built. They are wrong. Freedom is not a privilege. It is breath. It is the simple, necessary air we all must share. When one man, for greed or power, fences the water, or burns the food, or steals the voice of another, he is not just committing a crime. He is holding his hand over the mouth of his brother. We have learned, at great cost, that we all breathe the same air. We must not forget it." The Reverend looked up. Tahan was not looking at the paper. He was looking at Eliza. His gaze was one of such profound respect, such deep, quiet love, that Eliza had to look away, her heart too full. She had taken the lies he had built about her, and she had answered them with a truth that would be read by 1,000 people. The world was changing in other ways, too. The railroad, once the Iron Snake, was now just a collection of men, led by Shaw, and those men needed help. Working on the line was dangerous. Crushed hands, broken legs, and powder burns were common. Eliza and Tahan had made a new bargain. Every Sunday, Eliza held a class in field first aid for Shaw's men, teaching them how to use a tourniquet, how to clean a wound, how to splint a break. In return, Shaw's engineers, the men who had built the trestle, had turned their attention to the water. They were not building a bridge for trains. They were helping Tahan and the elder design and build an aqueduct, a small, clever system of wooden pipes and stone channels that would carry water from the high country, ensuring that the camp, and now the town, would survive the coming drought that the elder had long predicted. That evening, the work was done. The first autumn chill was in the air. Tahan and Eliza were in their cabin by the spring. The room was warm and smelled of wood smoke and dried herbs. Tahan stood at a wooden basin, washing his hands. The wound in his side had healed into a long, puckered scar, a permanent reminder, but he was washing his hands not of blood, but of the smell of the pine resin he had been using to seal the new water troughs. Eliza was tired. She untied her apron, her movements slow. She walked to the door, where a new, dry bundle of sage was waiting. She took it, and she tied it to a hook on the inside of the door frame. As she crushed a few leaves to release the scent, the clean, sharp, beautiful smell filled the small room. The scent of the prairie, the scent of his coat, the scent of their home. Tahan came up behind her. He did not speak. He just put his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He was warm. He was solid. He put his head down, his face next to her hair, and he breathed in the smell of the sage. "It is a good smell," he whispered. "It is the right smell," she replied, leaning her head back against his shoulder. He took her hand, the one that had held the pencil, the one that had cut the wire. He turned her around, and he looked at her. He had never told her he loved her, not in words. He had never needed to. Love, for them, had not been a grand gesture. It had been a series of small, timely actions. It was the poultice on a wounded hand. It was the coat given in the dark. It was the pulling of a child from a river. It was the hand that held on, even in betrayal. He bent his head and kissed her, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of sage and smoke and the promise of a long, quiet, and earned future. Forgiveness had not erased the memory of the fire or the fall, but it had defined their future, and that future had, at last, begun. Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please leave a comment below to share your thoughts and say hello. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to our channel, Wild West Tales, like this video, and give it a hype by hitting the button to help this story be heard by more people.